everyone, and welcome to Grounded with John Tester and Maritza Giorgio. We did not plan to spend any time on this platform on a Saturday, Senator.
I know. And then I'm watching a car auction, which is what I do early in the morning, and my brother calls up and says, "Hey, watching all this shit that's going down in Venezuela." So I turn it over and watch the news. So here we are.
Okay, so here we are. Overnight, the U.S. launched attacks on Venezuela. If you haven't seen by now, I'm sure you have. Captured the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, and his wife, put them on a battleship, the USS Iwo Jima, and the attorney general says that they are being indicted on drugs and weapons charges. And then, in a stunning announcement during a press conference at Mar-a-Lago, the president said this.
We can't take a chance that somebody else takes over Venezuela that doesn't have the good of the Venezuelan people in mind. We've had decades of that. We're not going to let that happen. We're there now, and what people don't understand, but they understand as I say this, we're there now, but we're going to stay until such time as the proper transition can take place. So we're going to stay until such time as we're going to run it, essentially, until such time as a proper transition can take place.
We're going to run it. We're going to run Venezuela. Now, just a few moments ago, Venezuela's vice president is demanding that the U.S. free Maduro, and the vice president called him the country's rightful leader. So there's a lot. There's a lot going on. There's a lot going on. We just wrapped a conversation with Senator Angus King of Maine. We are going to play that here live for you and then take your questions on the other side. But let's just get Senator Tester's reaction here.
Yeah, well, look, I mean, I think Maduro is not a good person. I think we can all feel good about him being the narco terrorist that he is, being being out of the presidency of Venezuela, and we can also feel good about the job that our military did in pulling off a pretty impressive operation, quite frankly. But I think what we need to be concerned about is the president of the United States saying we're going to run another country, and the president of the United States going into another country and basically bombing their capital and taking their leader. Um, Without any input from Congress whatsoever. None, zero, not a kaput, not a damn bit of input from Congress, and just does it himself. And I think it sets a precedent that may not have us feeling so good in a bit. I've said before, it's easy to get into wars, it's tough to get them to a close. And I think that that's exactly what we're doing here. And you've got it. I mean, there was no congressional authority to do this military action at all. Um, I haven't talked to everybody in Congress, but I haven't found many people. I haven't found anybody on the Democratic side anyway that was even told about this till after the fact. And I think it's a slippery slope. That's that's what I think. What happens if China goes into Taiwan? Well, this is exactly what Russia did to Ukraine. A sovereign nation invaded it to take it over um, and reunite the old USSR. What we've done with Venezuela is we've went into that country, and by the president's own words, we're going to be running that country. And he didn't say for how long. It might be for a week. It might be for a decade. But the bottom line is this is not the high ground that we should be on for a leader of the free world, for sure.
And I'll put this photo up. I mean, the president shared this photo on Truth Social after announcing this of Nicolas Maduro in transport. And there's just a lot still that we're kind of finding out. Again, we talk about this with Senator King, but there are multiple truths here. Multiple truths can exist at the same time. There are people from Venezuela celebrating this, of course, and this was highly unorthodox. Maduro, widely seen as not a good guy, right? And this was a stunning decision to capture him without any notification to Congress, like you said. And as we talk about with Senator King, a lot of other bad guys in the world, like Vladimir Putin. And this is just a kind of a shocking thing to wake up to. We are going to hear from Senator King about all this, but I do want to put up some other reaction from members of Congress. So this is from Representative Himes, the ranking member on the House Intelligence Committee, saying, yes, Maduro is an illegitimate ruler, but I've seen no evidence that his presidency poses a threat that would justify military action without congressional authorization, nor have I heard a strategy for the day after on how we will prevent Venezuela from descending into chaos, and basically calls for the administration to immediately brief Congress on the plan here. So that's from Representative Jim Himes. We see Senator Kim saying that Secretaries Rubio and Hegseth looked at every senator a few weeks ago and said this was not about regime change. And that's exactly what we're seeing today. And I want to put up what Marjorie Taylor Greene, Representative Marjorie Taylor Greene, posted. Basically, she went on to talk about drugs and fentanyl being responsible for over 70% of U.S. drug overdose deaths, and the Mexican cartels. And again, she is bringing up the hypocrisy over why President Trump pardoned the former Honduran president. And we are going to talk about that with Senator King, as you will hear. And then goes after this. And she basically says, this is what many in MAGA thought they voted to end. Boy, were we wrong. As of right now, neither party is offering the solution.
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly not what he ran on. Of course, he ran on the economy too, and it hasn't panned out so very, very well. And the tariffs, the healthcare stuff, all that is up in arms. If I might go a little bit off script here for a second, not that we have a script because we don't, but I want to read what Mark Warner wrote. It's kind of long, if you don't mind, because I think
Please.
it's important. He's a ranking Democrat on the Intelligence Committee. And here's what he said: our Constitution places the gravest decisions about the use of military force in the hands of Congress for a reason. Using military force to enact regime change demands the closest scrutiny, precisely because the consequences do not end, end with the initial strike. If the United States asserts the right to use military force to invade and capture foreign leaders it accuses of criminal conduct, what prevents China from claiming the same authority over Taiwan's leadership? What stops Vladimir Putin from asserting similar justification to abduct the Ukrainian president? Once this line is crossed, the rules that restrain global chaos begin to collapse, and authoritarian regimes will be the first to exploit it. None of this absolves Maduro. He is a corrupt authoritarian who has repressed his people, stolen elections, imprisoned political opponents, and presided over a humanitarian catastrophe that has forced millions of Venezuelans to flee. The Venezuelan people deserve democratic leadership, and the United States and the international community should have done far more years ago to press for a peaceful transition after Maduro lost a vote of his own citizens. But recognizing Maduro's crimes does not give any president the authority to ignore the Constitution. The hypocrisy underlying this decision is especially glaring. This same president recently pardoned former Honduran President Juan Hernandez, who was convicted in the U.S. court of serious drug trafficking charges, including conspiring with narcotic traffickers while in office. Yet now the administration claims that similar allegations justify the use of military force against another sovereign nation. You cannot credibly argue that drug trafficking charges demand invasion in one case while issuing a pardon in another. America's strength comes from our commitment to the rule of law, democratic norms, and constitutional restraint. When we abandon those principles, even in the name of confronting bad actors, we weaken our credibility, endanger our global stability, and invite abuses of powers that will long outlast any single presidency. Man, that's a mouthful, but he's spot on, and it covers all the bases. And we can feel good about Maduro being captured, but you can't feel good about the way it was done.
Okay. Well, we like I said, we just wrapped up this conversation with Senator Angus King. We are going to play that for you in whole right now. I will be watching for your comments and your questions here as we watch it, and then we'll come back out of it and chat even more on the other side. So here is our conversation with Senator Angus King. Okay, so we would like to welcome to Grounded here Senator Angus King of Maine, and we just thank you so much for your time at the last minute, sir.
Absolutely. It's always great to be with you and great to be with my friend John Tester. And you'll have to excuse me. I got a couple of cats that haven't had lunch yet, and they may be part of this deal. Here's one right here who I'm going to get rid of. Go.
We welcome the cats. We welcome
We
the
like
cats.
we like cats. It's good.
All right.
Well, Angus, it is good to see you. It's good to have you. I tell very few people this that if there's one thing I miss in Washington D.C., it's working with people like you. Somebody who is smart, understands democracy, understands our country, understands history, and somebody who, Maine's had a lot of great senators, and you're right there at the top of my book.
Well, I appreciate that, John. I'm humbled, and as you know, you and Tim Kaine, Dick Durbin, and a few others are we're a pretty close group, and we miss you because we don't have anybody to pay for dinner anymore. So that's a loss.
Wait,
Uh,
he paid for dinner? This
uh,
man hasn't
uh,
paid for anything.
that's bullshit, Kane.
Yeah,
'Cause
we know that.
the truth is I just could never find my wallet. And when
Yeah,
I
yeah,
mean,
yeah.
Durbin
He
had
takes me to lunch
you.
at Costco, so if he paid for a nice dinner beyond that, you're lucky. But I do wanna get into this news. Senator King, we've wanted to have you on for some time to talk about all kinds of things, and here we are on a Saturday waking up to this news of what happened in Venezuela overnight. So, I guess the first question I have for you is, when did you find out about this? And what did that look like? What did that look like when you found out?
I didn't find out about it any sooner than anybody else, even though I'm on the Armed Services and Intelligence Committee. I don't think there was much, if any, consultation with Congress at all before this happened. I have a couple of reactions. Let me start with two stipulations. One is Maduro is and was a bad guy, no question. Involved with drugs. He was a dictator. He ignored the results of the election. He was a bad guy all around. Second stipulation is our military is amazing. And the skill that they showed in the exercise of this operation was absolutely extraordinary. I mean, you think about it, of essentially parachuting into another country and taking the president prisoner without any troops or anybody being harmed is an amazing a feat of logistics and military skill. Having said that, I'm very concerned about where this leads us in a couple of different ways. Uh, One is there are lots of bad dictators around the world. There are lots of people that abuse their people for one reason or another. Does this mean that we've suddenly become the judge, jury, and executioner for bad guys around the world? And what kind of precedent does this set? I mean, can Taiwan now say, "Well, we think the president of Taiwan is a drug dealer or is corrupt or something else, so that's a justification for us taking over Taiwan"? Certainly, Putin has been saying these kinds of things about Zelensky for the past 4 years. So where it stops is the concern that I have of we basically bombed the capital city of a sovereign country with no authorization, declaration of war, or anything else from the people's representatives in Congress, um, and kidnapped the president of that country, taking him to the U.S. And I don't know I don't know where that ends. I mean, I'll end with one little quote from the Constitutional Convention in 1787, August 17th. They were debating the war power, and somebody suggested, well, Congress can't manage a war. The president should be able to declare war. And somebody said that one of the members of the convention said that's the essence of dictatorship. If a president could take the country into war on his or her own volition. And I think we should heed the people that divided the power up. Taking this country to war is a profound decision, And the people who founded this country realized that, and they put the declaration of war power into the Congress on purpose, and the commander-in-chief power to run the war in the hands of the president. There's nothing in Article 2 of the Constitution that authorizes the president to start a war. Let me end there, and I'm sure we can explore a lot of other aspects of this.
Well, look, Angus, I mean, you've said a lot with that, and it's pretty obvious that the president would rather ask for forgiveness than ask for permission, and I'm not sure he even wants forgiveness. But the fact of the matter is, this is Congress's job, and the fact is Congress hasn't done their job for the last nearly year now. They have pushed a lot of the authorities that they have and given them freely, if not encouraged the president to take them and do them instead of doing the job that the forefathers had in mind for the three branches of government. But the question is now is what does people in Congress do? What do senators, Republicans and Democrats, in both the houses of Congress do now? What can be done now? What do you anticipate will be done now?
Well, first, I should say that Roger Wicker, the Republican chair of the Armed Services Committee, issued a statement this morning that was essentially congratulatory of the president and very positive. Mark Warner, who's the former chair of the Intelligence Committee, now the ranking member, a Democrat from Virginia, issued a statement that was very critical, similar to what I just said, that he didn't like Maduro and he complimented our troops, but he also thought this was a very, very dangerous precedent. So now what happens now? Well, it seems to me the first thing that ought to happen would be hearings before the Armed Services Committee and perhaps the Intelligence Committee with senior members of the administration, like the Secretary of Defense, which, by the way, he's the Secretary of Defense, not the Secretary of War. There's no such thing as the Department of War under the statutes passed by Congress, and the Secretary of State to come before the Congress. And the first thing they should lay out is what's the legal basis for this? What's the legal basis for essentially invading the capital city of a foreign country and extracting the leader of that country? That's question number one. Question number two is what happens next? I don't know if you watched the president's speech this morning. I did, and I was listening to him. He said a lot of things that I think we expected him to say, but he said one sentence that really made me sit up, which is, "We're going to run the country now." Wow. That's we basically annexed Venezuela for a time. I mean, that was pretty extraordinary. Now, I understand the motivation for that because when you do something like this, when you strike down a leader, you don't know what's going to happen next. So I think this is the administration's effort to avoid that problem. But it's pretty breathtaking when the president of the United States says, okay, we've abducted the leader of this country, bombed their capital city, and now we're going to run the country. And then, of course, he talks about the oil and the natural resources. So it's we're in uncharted territory, John.
What there's so many different directions to go here. What does this mean for Canada, for Greenland, for
Well, that's the thing is that you hit on so much, Senator King, that I had already written down to ask about. I mean, you hit on China and Taiwan. You hit about Putin's justifications for going into Ukraine. But yeah, what Senator Tester's saying, what next? When we've heard the president talk about Canada being the 51st state and Greenland, like you said, Senator Tester.
Yeah, well, this goes to the larger question that John alluded to, and that is Congress has basically, particularly the Senate, well, both houses have abdicated their constitutional roles. The Constitution divided up power between the branches of government on purpose. Madison, I think it was the 51st Federalist, said, if legislative, judicial, and executive powers are in one set of hands, that's the perfect definition of tyranny. He used the word tyranny. I mean, he didn't mince words. And so the division of power is not a bug in the Constitution. It's absolutely the heart of the Constitution. And the Congress has allowed this president to just run roughshod over those restraints. Another perfect example is tariffs. Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution expressly delegates to Congress the power to regulate trade among foreign nations. That's tariffs. And yet this guy has declared emergencies. Listen, John, you and I live on the Canadian border. There's no emergency with Canada. But he declares an emergency and then says, I'm going to impose a 20% tariff or a 50% tariff. He gets mad at the president of the people in Brazil, so he puts a 50% tariff on them. Or, it's, and yet the conclusion is the Senate hadn't done a damn thing.
That's right.
And we're just sitting back and watching this unfold. The framers thought the Congress would fight for their own power. And what they didn't reckon with is party.
Yep.
And so what we have now is the majority party that's in the hands of the president's party that basically is saying whatever you want to do. And boy, oh boy, try to close your eyes and think if this was Joe Biden or Barack Obama. Uh, you know, Biden Biden tried to cancel student loans and they went they went nuts. What a horrible constitutional violation that was. And yet here we are, troops in American cities, tariffs on our friends and allies.
Troops,
The list is incredible.
troops on the ground in foreign countries that weren't on the ground yesterday, and Congress has no say in that.
Yeah.
I do want to play something for you both and get your reaction on the other side here.
Mr. President, did you notify any members of Congress in advance?
Marco, do you want to talk about that? Because you were involved. Sure.
We called members of Congress immediately after. This was not the kind of mission that you can do congressional notification on. It was a trigger-based mission in which conditions had to be met night after night. We watched and monitored that for a number of days. So it's just simply not the kind of mission you can call people and say, hey, we may do this at some point in the next 15 days.
Plus, if I could add one thing to that,
Watch this line.
Congress has a tendency to leak. This would not be good. If they leaked, General, I think it would have been maybe a very different result. But I have to say, they knew we were coming at some point, A lot of ships out there, they sort of knew we were coming. We went to. But Congress will leak, and we don't want leakers.
Okay, so a couple of points here. First of all, my question for you, Senator King, is has Secretary Rubio called you? And what is your reaction to what the president said about Congress leaking? What does that mean for the future? I mean, is this just how it works now? Congress is neutered indefinitely, and because the president says that Congress leaks?
Well, I think that's certainly the implication of what he said. And the answer to your question is no. I haven't heard from Secretary Rubio. As I say, I'm a member of Armed Services and Intelligence. But let me focus this a little bit. There's a sort of quasi-official body within the Congress called the Gang of Eight. And the Gang of Eight are the four leaders, the speaker and the minority leader in the House, the majority leader, minority leader, and then the four ranking people on the Intelligence Committee. And you can expand that to armed services. In other words, there's a difference between calling every member of Congress and calling a select group of the leadership. And to my knowledge, I've never heard of a leak out of the Gang of Eight. And I've been on the Intelligence Committee now for 13 years. I never recall a leak out of that committee. And we deal with classified information every single week. So that's too easy to say we're not going to notify Congress because they might leak. I can understand not, a broad scale notice to the whole House of Representatives and the Senate, but they could have had some prior notification to, for example, the chair and ranking member of Armed Services, Intelligence, and the leadership in both houses. And again, it's a question of do we want a president that has unlimited power now up to and including war? I texted one of my colleagues this morning and said, could you have a more overt act of war than bombing a foreign country and abducting its president? And the answer to my friend, who's I won't say who it is, but he's a guy that knows a lot about these issues, and his answer was very short: no. And again, where does this lead, and what precedent does this create? in terms of other countries. By the way, you can say, how about a dictator who has killed lots of people, who's kidnapped children, committed war crimes, bombed civilians, um, and purged opposition in his own country. Is that going to be the next candidate? By the way, that's a guy named Vladimir Putin.
Correct.
So it's like there are a lot of bad guys in the world, and this president's going to decide who he likes and who he doesn't like, and we're going to end up in this kind of situation, perhaps again. The other thing I got to mention, the blatant hypocrisy of this. If you watch the president, it's all about drugs. This guy was a narco trafficker, and that's all, that's what this is about, on protecting America. About a month ago, he pardoned the president of Honduras, who'd been convicted in a U.S. court of leading a major drug trafficking operation, and the president pardoned him. So is the difference between Honduras and Venezuela oil? I don't know, but it's hard to say that Maduro was worse than the fellow from Honduras that the president just pardoned.
Yeah, and these aren't your words, Angus. These are mine. It was obvious from that press conference this morning that was an hour long that it wasn't about drugs or democracy. It was about oil. It was absolutely everything the president talked about almost was oil, 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 oil. And we might get into that in a second. But Rubio said something during that press conference that I want to get your opinion on. He said this wasn't a military action. This was a legal action because the president Maduro had been indicted for being a narco terrorist. And this was a legal action to get him. Does that make any difference? It wasn't the Department of Justice that went in there and took him out. I don't believe. Maybe it was, but I don't think it was. I think it was our military people that did that.
Well, I'm sure that law enforcement people were involved in various ways, the FBI probably, but and of course this fellow's already been indicted in New York, but clearly it was a military operation. Otherwise, why did they have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff participating in the press conference? I mean, there were ships and troops, and I don't know the nature of who actually invaded the presidential residence, but it was clearly a military operation with a law enforcement impact. But again, where do you draw the line on that? What how do you draw the line between good dictators and bad dictators, and good narco traffickers and bad narco traffickers? That's what is worrisome about this, because it's exactly what the framers were worried about: a president that basically acted without constraint. And I understand that the president has to have the power to repel an imminent attack or an emergency situation, but this thing has been building up for months, and I'm not sure. I get again the phrase "we are going to run the." Man, I've never heard anything like that from a president of the United States.
I haven't either. It's amazing. And then to colonize the country. I mean, truthfully, I mean, we can say
Yeah,
what we want. We're going
what
to put America.
authority?
Yeah, yeah. Under what authority? Number one, and number two, we're going to turn our oil companies loose in there. They're going to pay the bills, but they're going to make a pile of money, and then they're going to pay us back and pay themselves back. It makes me wonder how much is going to be left for Venezuela.
Well, he actually said, I think, didn't he, that our major oil companies are now going to go in and
Yeah,
take over their oil infrastructure?
yeah, because he said that's really our oil infrastructure, not
Well,
theirs.
he said he promised to basically let the oil companies come in and have a formalized role in the rebuilding of Venezuela. I mean, he's really saying the quiet part out loud, even though Rubio and Secretary Hegseth tried to make this about drugs and democracy. I mean, he talked a lot about oil.
They did. They did. And he also talked about how this is going to be good for the Venezuelans. And you're right, Angus, getting rid of Maduro is a definite positive move forward. the problem is how can the United States, if China went into Taiwan, as you said earlier, how can the United States say anything about that being an illegal act?
I think we've pretty much given up the high ground. And again, I think that the comparison to the fellow from, I think Hernandez is his name, from Honduras is instructive, because it's almost an identical case without the oil, of course, but the same kind of charges could be made. And what if that's true? Then what that means is that the president can just decide on his own whatever's in his head that day, that this dictator's okay, and this one's not okay. I mean, we're like I said, we're in uncharted territory, and that's why this is one of the most important decisions a country can make, and that's why the people's representatives in Congress should have a role to play. And this is something that should be debated. And in fact, we tried. Tim Kaine brought up a resolution about Venezuela to at least have some congressional input into the decision several months ago. And of course, my Republican colleagues, at least most of them, enough of them to form a majority, voted it down. So again, it gets back to what you said of Congress abdicating the responsibility for making these difficult decisions. By the way, John, the Congress hasn't declared war since 1942.
Yeah.
And
We're-
but at least with the terrorists, we had something called an authorization for the use of military force, where Congress said, "Here's how you can use military force under what circumstances," and there's none of that in this case, no authorization whatsoever. And they keep citing Article 2 of the Constitution. The heart of Article 2 of the Constitution is that the president shall, quote, "see that the laws are faithfully executed." Well, that that's not a provision that they're paying too much attention to these days.
Right.
And to your
And
point,
no,
sorry,
go ahead, Reese. Go ahead.
to your point, Senator King, Hernandez of Honduras, I mean, according to our own Department of Justice, was at the center of this one of the largest and incredibly violent drug trafficking conspiracies, responsible for 4.5 billion doses of cocaine moving through the United States.
Yeah, and he got a presidential pardon because somebody told Donald Trump he was a good guy, or it was unfair, or it was a witch hunt, or those terms that resonate with him. No process that we know of. There was no discussion in the public about yes or no. It was and this is the pardon power is the only unilateral power the president has in the Constitution. There's no check or balance. Everything else, theoretically anyway, requires some working with Congress, confirmation of cabinet members and of judges, approval of treaties. All of those kinds of things require the input of Congress. Pardon doesn't. But in this case, there was no explanation that I know of as to why this fellow deserved a pardon, because on the face of it, he was and the Honduras guy, Hernandez, was already convicted in a court. He had been convicted in a court in the United States of these actions, and the president basically wiped the slate clean and let him go free.
And extradited legally from his
Yeah.
country, not just put on
Yeah.
a battleship.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the president's already said that we're going to be running Venezuela now for God knows how long it's going to be, because he was asked questions about that during the press conference, and there was no concrete timeline given whatsoever. Does Congress have a role, or will Congress have a role in determining how that's going to happen?
Well,
I-
it
I-
should. I mean, Congress's basic power, as you know, John, is the power of the purse. You used to be on the on the Appropriations Committee. That's where the Congress's power lies if they want to use it. They could say, we're not going to fund the occupation of Venezuela until you give us a justification and a legal basis for our country doing so. But don't hold your breath for that to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks.
In the meantime, where will the money come from? And I mean, you got there's another deadline coming up, what, the 20th of January, when this funding bill runs out, and hopefully
Yeah.
it won't be another government shutdown, but who knows? I wonder where the money's gonna come from. They said they're gonna get reimbursed, that's fine, but where does it come from in the meantime? What
Well,
agency dropped?
Well, he hasn't paid too much attention to the appropriations process. They'll take it from somewhere else. They'll take it from military construction or the VA or some other agency of government. The only one they won't take it from is ICE, I suspect. But that's what they've done in the past uh, tap some other. Well, here's a perfect example. Remember the president made his speech the other night and talked about he was giving every member of the military $1,776 as a
Yep,
bonus. Well, it turns out that was money that was appropriated by Congress for housing allowances for soldiers. So it wasn't really a gift. It was shifting money from one pot to the other without authority, as far as I know, and making a big deal about how much we love the troops, and we do love the troops, but it's not honest to say you're giving them something when you're really taking it from another pot of money that's destined for their benefit.
that's right. They literally took money away from them for housing allowance and give it back to them over here and claimed that it was a heroic thing to do.
Right.
When in fact, and I think Maritza's done a number of stories on our military people and what they're up against for, childcare and for buying food and all that good stuff. Right, Maritza? I'm
I
setting
have.
setting you up, Maritza. You got to take this
Thank
ball and you got to run with
I have, and a lot to do with housing allowance, actually. And it goes against them when they're trying to apply for other forms of help like SNAP. But that is a different topic. I did want to say that we asked, we have a following on in our community here, and some viewers submitted some questions. And so one of the questions that I thought was a smart one, especially as we wake up to this news that we have attacked Venezuela and have taken custody of the country's president. What what could the international community do to us? What could the international community do to try to control the Trump administration's government right now?
Well, it just depends on what their reaction is. I mean, the reaction this morning, particularly in Latin America, was kind of interesting. The right-wing dictators applauded, and the other countries looked on with some horror. So it depends. There's already been a request, I guess, to convene the Security Council of the United Nations. It's hard to say what other countries will do, but the fundamental rule since World War II is you don't invade other sovereign countries. I mean, that's what without being invited in some way, and we stretched that in Iraq for sure. But that's the basic offense that Putin that Putin accomplished in Ukraine. So it's hard to say what the international community is going to do. But again, I want to go back to what I said at the very beginning. Maduro was a bad guy, definitely involved with drugs, definitely a dictator in this country, definitely voided a legal election, But the question is, where does that stop? If
Mhm.
where could the president do this the next time to some country that he doesn't like for some reason? And that's what's so worrisome about this is the precedent that it sets. And I don't want to be one of those people that wrings their hands and say, "Oh, this was, we shouldn't be taking this strong action." I believe in taking strong action, but we have a constitutional structure that divides power for a reason. And this is one of the very things the framers of the Constitution was worried about. Was the president unilaterally taking the country in on putting the country on a wartime footing?
The other thing that occurs to me, and we heard what Rubio said about this is not something you could tell Congress about, and the president said it could leak. But the truth is you could ask Congress for an authorization of the use of military force, an AUMF. That doesn't mean you're going to use it. It just means if you decide to do something military, you have Congress's support. and they didn't even get that.
No,
Uh,
no, and historically, presidents have gone to Congress in these situations, and it's not a glorious history. I mean, the Gulf of Tonkin resolution at the beginning of Vietnam was not a great was not a high point for the U.S. Congress. But what you're saying, John, is that we could have provided authorization for force in Venezuela under the following circumstances, and it was put some boundaries around it, but they never came and asked for it,
No, and
to my knowledge.
and according to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, this planning had been going on for 3 months and got real serious about 2 weeks ago.
And
And
they interestingly said it was planned for 3 or 4 days before, but they didn't go because of the weather. All of that tells you that it wasn't an emergency,
Yeah.
and that there was time to have some consultation, at
Yep.
least on the broad question of Venezuela and what role should we undertake there. And again, co- people don't like Congress. I know that's news to you, but the Congress are the people's representatives, and they're there in order to have some check on the executive's power to do whatever they want. And this is certainly one of them. And as I say, the Constitution was very explicit. If you go back to the debates about dividing the power up, to declare war in Congress, to manage be commander in chief under the presidency. But this one, this is new ground, and we'll see whether how the Congress responds, and whether there's serious questions raised, what the legal justification is, uh, and we'll have to see whether Congress stands up on its hind legs and decides to draw some lines.
well, I really do hope they do. I'm sure Rand Paul is going to be one that stands up and says this is crazy to have been done, because he's done that before. And I don't agree with Rand on a lot of things, but I think he's right on this. I mean,
Mhm.
uh, Congress needs to be playing a role in this to make sure that things don't happen that have uh, extenuating collateral damage, so to speak, that
Yeah.
you have to live with for generations potentially to come. So
well, and
that's
that's kind of this point of this next question, because we've heard from Trump camp for a long time that we're out of the business of regime change, right? That we're not going to go into any, or the peace.
Yeah.
This is the peace president. I mean, just a few days ago on New Year's, the message was, "Here's to a peaceful 2026" from the president. And we've proven time and time again that forced regime change is not our strong suit, and that there are unintended consequences, and we don't know what happens when we go in and do this. I mean, we spent 20 years in Afghanistan. It's in terrible shape today. So what is the plan? What comes next? How do we know there aren't terror cells forming right now in Venezuela? I mean, what is your concern about the unintended consequences of this?
Well, the two examples that jump into my mind are first Iran and then Chile. We overthrew the elected leadership in Iran in the early 50s, the CIA did, and installed the Shah of Iran, who served as a dictator for 20 years or so, and then was overthrown, of course. And we've got this terrible theocratic regime in Iran as a result. The other is overthrow of Allende in Chile, when we ended up with a brutal dictator of Pinochet. Uh, so we don't have a good track record in this regard. And once you set something like this in motion, it's very difficult to control it, even though the president says we will, quote, run the country. I don't know what that really means. Does that mean the U.S. is going to run the police department and the courts and build bridges and repair highways? I don't know what run the country means. But that's one of the most dangerous things. Now, but again, Maduro was terrible, and the question is whether what comes after is going to be any better, and that remains to be seen.
100% correct. As always, Angus King is always 100% correct.
And we hear so much about America First, and they talked about it in the press conference today, and we've heard that be the justification for why there's been a sudden shift within some members of the GOP in the Senate and the House in changing their stance on Ukraine and not wanting to support Ukraine. How is this more America first than supporting Ukraine?
It's not. It's not. Not supporting Ukraine is a mistake of historic geopolitical. Uh, it is the worst thing we could possibly do, is to empower Vladimir Putin and reward him for aggression and what he's done in Ukraine. I mean, the president's having phone calls with him the day before he bombed civilian areas of Kyiv. I mean, and he gets away with anything, and he's already threatening Eastern Europe and the Baltics. Drones into Polish airspace, incursions into the airspace of the Baltics. If Maya Angelou said, if somebody tells you who they are, you should believe them. And Putin has said that he thought the greatest tragedy of the 20th century was the unraveling of the Soviet Union. And he wants to rebuild the Russian Empire, and Ukraine is the first step. And to allow him to do that, it would be incredibly destabilizing for Europe. I go back. When people used to call me when we first started supporting Ukraine, and they'd say, why do we do this?" I said, "Google Sudetenland, 1938, when Hitler could have been stopped with a minimum of effort, and 55 million lives could have been saved." And there's no sense of history here, and so I think this is not. We're sending boots on the ground into Venezuela, and we're not sending sufficient military weapons and no boots on the ground to Ukraine, where the vital national interests, I think, are higher in the long run.
Yeah, well, I can guess that one person that's really happy about what happened this morning is probably Vladimir Putin, because it takes our resources and puts them in a different spot than could ever be used in Ukraine now.
Yeah, I suspect that's true. Although Russia and China both condemned this because they both have interests in Venezuela, and it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. But it certainly makes it difficult for us to say no to some incursion into a sovereign country that either China or Russia decides to take on in the reasonably near future.
100% correct. Well, Angus, unless Maritza has more good questions, because she
I
always
just have
does.
one more question, which is that we have so many more questions for you unrelated to Venezuela. Like, I have wanted to have you on forever to talk about successfully winning as an independent. I also wanted to talk about healthcare subsidies, but this has popped up. So my question for you is, will you come back and have that conversation sometime?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I'd be happy to, and recount some of the history of running for governor and then senator as an independent. I can tell you it's kind of a luxury because I get to call them as I see them. And it's I wouldn't looking back on it, I wouldn't have done it any other way. But that's something we can spend some time talking about. Be glad to talk about that. And I think we ought to be talking also about the broader scale breakdown of the constitutional structure under this administration, because that's what really worries me, is that we're taking steps now and enabling the executive. Donald Trump today, it could be somebody else tomorrow. We're fundamentally altering the structure of our government, I think, in a very, very dangerous way. And that's something I'd be glad to talk about when we have another chance.
We would love to do that, and we might even get into a little Civil War history with Maine. How's that?
Absolutely. Joshua Chamberlain, whose house is a half a block from mine, is the guy that many historians believe turned the tide at the Battle of Gettysburg and saved the country. I can talk about that for a while too, as you know, John.
Yeah, exactly right. I've heard it. I've heard it, and it's interesting, and it's good. And then one more thing before we let you go, and that is that Heather Cox Richardson has been on with us, and we've been on with her, and Man, I'll tell you what, Maine's got some great people in it. She's top flight.
Isn't she brilliant?
Oh,
She writes what amounts to a master's thesis every night, complete
she's
with footnotes.
incredible. She's
Yeah, she
absolutely incredible and
well,
such a rich source of information for all of
I'm
us.
I'm proud to say she's a friend. She lives about I guess 30 miles from here as the crow flies, and I went with a group the other day, and somebody somebody said, "I wish my parents loved me as much as they love Heather Cox Richardson."
Don't we all?
I thought that was pretty good.
And let's
Well,
not forget about Stephen King, who I would love to have on this show.
well,
Also,
he's also a good friend. He did a digital ad for me in my last campaign, which was hilarious. It had me knocking on his door up in Bangor, with the bats and all that kind of stuff, and I was trick or treating, and we had a lot of fun. He's a terrific guy.
oh, well, now you've done it, Senator, because we're going to be asking you to help us get him on Grounded.
I can't I can't I can't promise that. I will tell you one great Stephen King story. He and I were together with a group of middle school students once doing a presentation about education, and one kid raised his hand and said, "Mr. King," not me, to Steve, "do you ever have nightmares?" And Steve said, "No, I give them to you."
That's true.
I thought that was a pretty good answer.
That's true. I mean, even his book about the JFK assassination was 11/22/1963. What a
Yeah.
fabulous book that was.
Well, I will recommend one of his books that is not a horror story. It's sort of his autobiography. It's called On Writing. And a lot of it is about his personal history and then how he writes and how he composes and all that kind of thing. But the biography, the autobiography, is fascinating. And he grew up about 20 miles from less than that, 15 miles from here, in a little mill town. It's a great story. He had a single mom and wasn't really looking for university. And a teacher at his high school spotted his talent and encouraged him to go to the University of Maine. And as you know, he went to the University of Maine, and then he wrote Carrie, and it was rejected and rejected and rejected and rejected. At one point, he actually threw it away, and Tabby, his wife, pulled it out of the trash can and said, "You should keep trying." And ultimately, it got published, and now I think he's the best-selling author in the world.
Yeah, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Just like the other king, Angus King, is pretty amazing. You're a national treasure, friend.
Well,
Thanks
thanks.
for being on with us. Thanks for being on with us.
Great to be with you. Always a pleasure. See you later.
Okay, so that was our chat with Senator Angus King. We have quite a few people still with us here. We thank you for spending part of your Saturday with us on all these live channels. Thoughts, Senator?
Well, first of all, Angus King is a national treasure, and he's an incredibly smart visionary, knows his history, and that always helps when you're making policy, so you know what the future is going to bring. Um, Look, I just think that Maduro's a bad guy. Catching him makes you feel good right now, but I can't help but think that the collateral damage that this is going to do long term is not healthy for the country. But what it does do for the president is going to take everybody's attention off Epstein, everybody's attention off the economy, and we're going to be focused on this for the next God knows how long. Probably, who knows if we're going to run the country? Maybe for as long as they're running the country. Who knows? So it's pretty crazy.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions about what that looks like. Like Senator King brought up, what does that look like? Are we how in charge of this country are we right now? And like you said, many people, I've seen it on social media, many people celebrating this because a lot of Venezuelans harmed
Yeah.
here, and a lot of questions about the legality, like we've said. So we had a few comments during this. One of our subscribers on Substack asked, "What will Maduro pay for his pardon?" I think that's an interesting question. After we've talked to Liz Oyer, the former pardon attorney for the DOJ, and we are hearing so much about the millions of dollars being paid to lobbyists that people are paying to get their cases pardoned by the president.
Yeah, access. It's not been hidden. That's for damn sure. Give me the money, and we'll show you the door.
Here's the other question that popped up in several different ways and forms. What can people do? What can people
Well,
do?
look, I don't think this is any different than healthcare or tariffs or anything else. You've got to get a hold of your elected representatives that are in Congress and tell them to do their job. Tell those people that say they love the Constitution to read it, because it really needs to be followed. Otherwise, you put the democracy and the entire country at risk of failure. And so that's what I would do. I would continue to get a hold of them. And I know it's been frustrating because a lot of them put up the walls so you can't get to them. But keep writing, keep finding out where they're going to be, and try to be there to ask them questions, and try to get the press to ask questions. God knows that needs to happen too. And and hopefully they understand that the people in the Senate and the House do have a role, and it's not a role of rubber stamp. It's a role of accountability.
I want to put up this, like we said, lots of people celebrating one side of this, and that is the removal of Maduro. And Maria Corina Machado, who won the 2025 Nobel Peace Prize, wrote this and wrote, "Venezuelans, the hour of freedom has arrived." And she wrote a long letter here, and basically saying, we've struggled for years, we've given everything, and it has been worth it. What had to happen is happening. This is the hour of the citizen. Let us remain vigilant, active, and organized until a democratic transition is achieved. So yes, there's just a lot going on. We will continue to follow this, and hopefully there is some oversight, and hopefully peace remains. Right? I mean, that's nobody wants to see.
Look, in the end, I hope this all works out for the best for everybody, because nothing can be better than if the United States succeeds. I hope it works out for the Venezuelan people, because the truth is that they've been through enough. I just think there's a lot of opportunities here for some bad stuff to go on internationally that will affect this country domestically.
Okay, so question from me to you, couple
Oh,
like multi-pronged.
yes.
Okay, so first of all, what is it like to wake up to this? Well, your brother called you and told you about this. You were watching a car auction.
That's right.
What
That's
is
right.
it like for you to be home and watching this all from afar, where a year ago, wait, what day is it? No, more than a year ago, it would have been quite different. And what would that day look like for you? What would this have looked like for you if you were still in the Senate? What would this day have looked like?
I would be calling a lot of people. I would be calling leadership. I would be calling people who were ranking members and chairmen of the respective committees that I were on that had some influence over what's going on here. And I would be encouraging the chairman and the ranking member to have hearings, multiple hearings on what transpired. People have a right to know on what's going on. This is the country's reputation on the line here, and and I would just be calling as many people within the administration and in Congress as I possibly could to try to find out what went on, why it went on, and why Congress wasn't consulted. And then I would absolutely be demanding either, well, both from a personal standpoint and individual one-on-one conversation, to have some hearings, and then I'd also be doing it through the media, because I think hearings and making sure what's being done here is good for the country is really what's important.
We have a comment on YouTube that says John Tester for president.
Yeah, well, they've been drinking, and it's too early in the day to be drinking. Okay, right? Well,
Oh,
maybe it isn't. I mean, it's been a long day already.
I mean, it's what is it, 2 o'clock here in the mountains? Okay, so that's what we have for you today, folks. Lots of news. We will follow this. Like I said, we didn't plan to do this, but big news today, and it's only the 3rd of January. So, wow, 2026 coming in with a bang.
Coming in hot. All right.
Let me ask you about your hat really quick before you go, though, because this is technically
Conservation Partners hat. The outlines is actually quite unique. It's an outline of a fish and a cow, where people get together and not be divided, but work to make both systems work, so we can have livestock and wildlife.
there's a
So,
metaphor in there somewhere, I think.
is there a metaphor?
Yeah, working together, coming together.
Working together. Yeah.
You need a vegetable on that, though.
Yeah, you know, fish are kind of a vegetable.
What?
Just kidding. Just kidding.
I'm going to see you next week, and I have a hat for you that I picked up for you, so we will unveil that next week. We want to thank everybody for joining us. We want to thank our guest, Senator Angus King, for joining us at the last minute here to talk about how the event's unfolding. We want to thank our friends at Pearl Jam for letting us use their music. You can find us on Substack, Blue Sky, Instagram, YouTube. You can shoot us an email anytime at groundedpcast@gmail.com. We are so grateful for this community. We want to say Happy New Year to you, and we will continue to follow this along with all the rest of you.
God bless America and tally ho.